The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
Okay, let's go.
Hey, everybody, and happy Wednesday. First of all, apologize to I call them the 7 a.m. crew. It's the folks that listen to the podcast episode at 7 a.m. when they're driving to work or out on their morning walk. Anyway, yesterday's episode obviously was a long one. It was incredibly complicated, and I received an absolute ton of questions, really just trying to understand it better. And so, I'm not kidding, I spent a good part of yesterday kind of replying to different people through email, DM, through the socials, text message, and a few great phone calls, actually. So what I decided to do, and unfortunately I just couldn't get it out in time for this morning, is I'm actually going to do a little bit of a rewind on yesterday's episode. I'm going to cut up certain parts, really the ones that receive the most questions, and then provide a little more, I guess, explanation. And one thing I did want to say is, because I did have one close friend kind of call me out on something. Well, he didn't really call me out. He just questioned me. He said, hey, sometimes I know exactly what you're trying to say. And then other times you sort of, you say, hey, give that thought, think what you think of it, decide what you think of it. And he's like, why don't you just tell us what you think of everything? And, to be honest with you, my answer to him was that, I'm not saying I'm the end-all be-all on this, and at the end of the day, which is another phrase I say a lot, there are certain things where, yeah, I might have an opinion on it, but that's not the point. The point of this, honestly, the point of Deep Shallow Dive and this entire podcast is not just for me to spout off my opinions. The point is to bring up things that I think we should think about collectively. And again, I said it in episode 2, search for the truth collectively. And so there are certain things that, I'm going to play for you, and I kind of want you to think it through yourself, and that he was referring to the hospital bombing situation. And I'll be honest, his take was, to me, Israel did it. This doesn't make any sense from the BBC clip and then everybody backing out afterward. Obviously it looks like they came under pressure from probably the White House, because again, like I said yesterday, it doesn't take a genius to piece together that Israeli bombs are supplied by the United States. And so if a United States supplied bomb dropped on a hospital and killed 500 innocent civilians, that's not a good look. That's not a good look. And it's incredibly sad wherever that bomb came from. But that was what he was talking about. And he's like, I feel like you didn't really weigh in on that. And he's right. I didn't completely weigh in on that. But I presented you the information because that's one of the things that I think you have to decide for yourself what you think about that situation. And we're gonna critique a couple of those clips a little later, like I said. But anyway, so today I might introduce a couple new pieces of information, but for the most part, I'm going to try to go through yesterday's stuff and then replay the most controversial stuff and then provide a little bit of clarity. All right, the first thing I'm going to replay is a portion of Harry Truman's speech from 1948. And by the way, Harry Truman was a Democrat. I didn't even really realize that till I asked one of my voice-activated devices, which I have way too many of, and I'm not going to mention the name or it'll beep right now. But he was a Democrat who said this. And so let's give a listen to this portion again.
The decision to recognize Israel is an easy one. I had to make a compromise with the Arabs and divide Palestine.
All right, first of all, I've had a lot of people continue to say, hey, Palestine never was a country or whatever. And you know what? honestly, that's all semantics at this point, even though it was under British rule, whatever. I don't care. That's semantics. That's the President of the United States in 1948 saying, I have to divide Palestine. Now, you can call Palestine a country, a territory, a province. I don't care. Call it whatever you want, but it's something that belonged to those people. So let's put that thing to bed.
The Jews wanted to chase all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the Arabs wanted to chase all the Jews into the Red Sea. And what I was trying to do was to find a homeland for the Jews and still be just with the Arabs.
Okay, that just shows that, man, this thing has been brutal and rough all the way back to 1948.
But when you go into a thing of that kind, the people you help most are the ones that get most angry with you. Both of them were against me on the situation, but as President of the United States, I paid no attention to them, carried out what I thought was right, and I had the support of the Congress, and I could do it, which is unusual in these days.
Harry Truman had some cojones. And so I wanted to emphasize this part because, you know, this will probably be a separate episode at some point, but this really brings up the concept of colonialism and imperialism. And let me read this to you. Colonialism is where one country physically exerts complete control over another country, and imperialism is formal or informal economic and political domination of one country over the other. And so, you know, honestly, like, you could say, like, God, where did the United States get off even doing that in 1948? I mean, seriously, like, the way he said it, it was like, hey.
But as President of the United States, I paid no attention to him, carried out what I thought was right, and I had the support of the Congress, and I could do it, which is unusual in these days.
If anybody's a DJ out there, feel free to create a mix track of me and Harry Truman. Ray D and Harry T. Wicka, 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 wicka. Anyway, so, you know, I wanted to replay that because, man, it's like, that's pretty powerful. And again, that's 1948. That's the President of the United States. So in summary, you know, this all to me, I don't want to think about, let's go back 3,000 years and, you know, who was living there 3,000 years ago. The current situation and all of the current rioting and protests and demonstrations and everything you see right now, whether it's college students at Harvard or anyone else, it all starts with that decision by Harry Truman in 1948. So that's where we're starting with this, and that's why I played that clip yesterday, but hopefully giving, I guess, this additional perspective kind of puts that in place. And again, like I said, you know, that concept of was Palestine a country before 1948 or not, honestly, I don't even care. All I know is this all happened because of that, and you've got the president referring to Palestine, basically talking about it as if it is a country. So whatever you want to call it, that's fine. But, you know, for all intensive purposes, I think it's pretty clear that to all the people involved at that time, it was a country. All right, I'm going to play for you the last snippet where he basically talks about, actually just listen to it.
Could you tell us specifically that a lot of Jewish people were against you too?
Oh, well, there were a lot of Jewish people against me because they wanted the whole of Palestine. As I say, they wanted to drive all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
All right, again, he says the whole of Palestine, just to reinforce that. But, you know, the takeaway from that to me was, you know, this thing has never been able to be looked at as creating a two-state, I guess, system or situation. And there's a lot of things going on with the current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. I shared all this yesterday, and we're going to build on this. You know, why don't the world leaders and everybody just get involved and say, okay, we're gonna create a two-state system. You know, this is going to be, there's enough land there, seemingly for everybody. But, you know, again, and this applies to the Palestinians as well. So, you know, don't think this is one-sided. I mean, if you look at any I'm going to use the word rhetoric, but that's not really the right word, but that comes from people on the Palestinian side. Nobody ever talks about, hey, let's share. They also absolutely want, all or nothing. And I'm not even going to say what's fair. I'm just going to say it's never going to happen. You're never going to have all or nothing on potentially either side. I mean, really either side. So let's move towards, this two-state compromising system and let people just live their lives in peace. And it doesn't have to be collective harmony, but individual harmony. Okay, anyway, that's the Harry Truman stuff. All right, next. All right, let's dive into the hospital situation. I'm going to start off by playing the original BBC clip. So again, remember, this is the original reporting from the BBC, basically, I think like that night or day right after this happened.
The Israeli military has been contacted for comment, and they have said that they are investigating. But, it is hard to see what else this could be, really, given the size of the explosion, other than an Israeli airstrike or several airstrikes. Because, when we've seen rockets being fired out of Gaza, we never see explosions of that scale. We might see half a dozen, maybe a few more people being killed in such rocket attacks. But we've never seen anything on the scale of the sort of explosion on the video I was watching earlier, which, as you say, is still to be verified.
All right, now let's go to President Biden in his Oval Office address. By the way, I think I had said it was State of the Union. It was not State of the Union. I think I corrected myself already on that. But again, just to correct myself, it was an Oval Office address, which, by the way, drew 20 million eyeballs, according to Reuters. And so, I don't know, I find that number so low. I really do. I mean, I know people are seeing it different places, and I don't think that takes into consideration the views on social media or streaming platforms or things like that. But the actual television viewing audience of 20 million, I find that number low, but you know what? Maybe it's not in today's day and age. Anyway, this is quick. Listen to this again.
Like so many other, I'm heartbroken by the tragic loss of Palestinian life, including the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, which was not done by the Israelis.
Shucky ducky quack quack, instead of that's interesting, like I said yesterday. Okay, all I want to point out on that is that I thought him immediately saying that after he said the explosion, that to me, honestly, that kind of made sense that all these other news outlets would potentially retract it. Because again, I mean, Harry Truman was a big bad bully in 1948. And obviously the United States and the presidency and the administration, again, this is not Biden specific, it's all of them, we're only stronger. So anyway, think through that. That seriously is something that is an individual thing to think about. All right, next I'm going to replay the clip from MSNBC. And, I'm replaying this for a different reason. I mean, to me, this is a pretty one-sided clip, and, they're saying it without saying it. But the reason I'm replaying it is because it also calls into question, if you are I stand with Israel and Israel did not do this, and MSNBC is saying what I'm about to play for you, this is the same MSNBC that for 2 years, 3 years, created all the anti-Trump narrative, which I think you supported. So now the question I'm asking seriously is, does that make you question whether it was that or other previous MSNBC reporting? You know what I mean? Like, you got to treat this collectively. You have to treat this collectively. And so now hearing this, if what I'm about to play for you pisses you off, does that then make you question everything from the previous that you were cheerleading?
is not providing any evidence to back up its claims that this was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. They are citing intelligence that they have not yet made public. We should also say that this kind of death toll is not what you normally associate with Palestinian rockets. These rockets are dangerous, they are deadly, they do not tend to kill hundreds of people in a single strike in the way that Israeli high explosives, especially these bunker buster bombs that are used to target these Hamas tunnels under Gaza City, do have the potential to kill hundreds of people. And we should say finally that there are instances in the past where the Israeli military has said things in the immediate aftermath of an incident that have turned out not to be true in the long run. And the one example I'll give you is that when the Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed in the occupied West Bank, the Israeli military initially said that she was killed by Palestinian gunmen, and it was only months and months later that they admitted that it was likely an Israeli soldier who fired the fatal shot.
All right, again, I'm just curious. I really am. Like, does that make anybody that supports MSNBC prior, and obviously that clip, to me was saying it without saying it, does that make you change your opinion on what your thoughts are of that network? Let me know. Would love to hear that. All right, next I'm going to play the BBC retraction, which came from their BBC Verify team, whatever that is. But I'm going to interject some stuff because the way she said it yesterday, I mean, it's pretty easy to just not see what she's saying or not hear clearly what she's saying. So let's start on this.
Ever since the explosion happened last night at around 7 p.m. local time, the BBC Verify team has been analysing all the images and video that have emerged. You can see where the hospital is located within Gaza City. And this footage shows what appears to be the courtyard car park of the hospital in flames. We've been able to establish that that's what it is from the shape of the buildings.
All right, first of all, she says, the courtyard hospital in flames, we've been able to establish that's what it is from the shape of the buildings. I mean, what does that even mean? That's like I don't know. I don't think there's much you can get from that. It kind of feels very fluffy to me. All right, now listen to this.
Now, the Al Jazeera television station was broadcasting live from Gaza at the time. You can see a series of bright lights in the air. We don't know exactly what these are. The Israeli army says there was a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad.
All right, the main thing I want to say about this is, we see a series of bright lights in the air. The Israelis say it was a failed rocket launch by a rival group, Islamic Jihad. I mean, I'm not even going to comment on that. What I am going to comment on is something I wanted to say before, and that is, I've talked about artificial intelligence and AI and all that stuff before a lot, actually, a few different episodes. And what I will say is the footage I've looked at, honestly, I don't even know what's real and what's not anymore. And this is for both sides, by the way. Again, this is whether it's Al Jazeera which Al Jazeera, by the way, is probably, more pro-Palestine, or BBC or whomever. What I'm saying is it is so easy to create stuff that looks incredibly real. I've talked about this several times. And again, I'm not saying that's the case in this situation, but when you look at the footage they're showing in that video, that easily can be created in Midjourney or DALL-E or one of so many different artificial intelligence, imaging programs these days. So that's something I more want to just kind of put that in the back of your mind on everything that's going on.
Then you can see a flash, and that's followed shortly afterwards by a big fireball. Our verification teams have looked at these images and can tell from the roofs and from other skyline details illuminated by the flames that it was in the main courtyard of the hospital.
Okay, again, this to me is just another big nothing burger. Your verification team just needs to look at the courtyard of the hospital, which looks like a nuclear bomb exploded. It's completely disintegrated, So I don't understand what the point of the verification team looking at that and then determining it did occur in the courtyard. Just look at the courtyard. Of course it occurred in the courtyard.
Next, they've been looking at daylight images taken this morning. Here you can see quite a lot of fire damage to the cars, but most of the buildings surrounding it are still mostly intact and standing, and there's actually a relatively small crater.
Again, the fire damage to the cars, the buildings are intact. I mean, I don't really get anything from that. Obviously, I can see that. The one thing she did say is a relatively small crater, and, that to me supported, well, it does reinforce the claim that if this was an Israeli bomb, that the hole would be much bigger. Their bombs produce much more damage than these others. So again, I don't know. Think what you will on that and decide for yourself what makes sense there.
Now, we've shown these images to a number of weapons experts, and while they couldn't come to a firm conclusion, several of them told us that if the explosion had been caused by the type of bomb normally used by Israeli forces, the crater would have been bigger and there would have been more damage to the buildings.
Okay, that was funny. I promise I did not set that up on purpose. The way I'm doing this is I'm basically going clip by clip and I'm stopping it to where I want to interject. And to be honest, I can't remember obviously what comes after. And so as soon as I said what I had said previously and I moved forward to the next piece of that clip, that is exactly what she said. And again, I'm being dead serious. I did not remember that from yesterday. But there you have it. There you have it on that.
One way of trying to establish what hit this hospital is by studying bomb or missile fragments at the scene. But our team on the ground and the team here haven't sseen any.
I mean, again, one way to establish what hit the hospital is to study fragments, but our team hasn't seen any. I don't know what the point of that is.
Now, look at this image we found from last night of two men searching through the crater we showed you earlier. The logo on their vests is from the Palestinian police, from the Explosive Ordnance Department. We don't know what, if anything, they recovered.
All right, couple things on that. I need to go back and look at that image, but man, they found an image and they were able to zoom in so tight to see what the logo on their vest is. The other part of that was she basically said, there's a picture, you've got Palestinian Authority, they're picking up something, we don't know what that is. And I think that basically supports the fact that she said earlier, our team didn't find any. Now there is other information out there that says that someone on the Palestinian side, they did recover the head of the bomb. I don't really know what that is. Maybe that's like the black box on an airplane that goes down. So maybe there's something that is able to be deciphered from that.
The Islamic Jihad movement put out a statement today saying the explosion was caused by Israeli aerial bombing and claiming that they have the remnants of the explosive head, but they haven't yet provided any evidence of this. What's not in dispute is that there were a very large number of casualties, according to Palestinian officials. Mostly, we think, of people who've been sheltering in the hospital from Israeli airstrikes, sleeping on the grass here.
Oh my God, maybe I should listen ahead to the rest of the clip. Again, there it happened again. I promise you, I do not remember what these clips say. Honestly, the entire 43 episodes have like meshed together in my mind, but there you have it. Actually, that's pretty cool that I'm kind of saying it and then the clip supports it. And I swear on my dad's soul that is the God's honest truth.
To establish the exact truth of what caused them, you'd need an independent investigation. But that's not going to happen in what is an active war zone.
All right, that was the end of that. And again, she says it. She says, to establish exactly what happened, you'd need an independent investigation, but that's not going to happen in an active war zone. And that's what at least the folks on the Palestinian side are calling for. They're calling for an independent investigation. But again, you heard that pretty clearly. That to me was a statement said on purpose in that that's not going to happen because it's an active war zone. So anyway, let's see what comes of that. Hopefully there is some truth that comes out of that, but the way life works, there's probably not going to be, and something else is going to happen today or tomorrow or the next day, and we're going to get zero closure on the hospital situation and move on to the next thing. Seriously, that's been 2023. All right, the next clip I played yesterday was Al Jazeera's basically retort to that. I'm not going to replay that. If you want to hear that, go back and listen to episode 42 and you can catch, what Al Jazeera said. But they basically refuted everything that this secondary BBC clips was saying. All right, just two quick things. To be fair, Al Jazeera, if you don't really know what that is, so that is a Qatari-owned Arabic language news television network. So again, it's owned by the country of Qatar. It's an Arabic language news network. So obviously, there's going to be probably bias. If there is bias, there's going to be bias toward the Arab world, and in this case, Palestine. So I did want to be fair in saying that. The other thing is, and I touched on this yesterday, after this situation, Israel did kick out Al Jazeera along with what I think is all foreign news networks out of their country. Now, again, you could argue that and say, well, of course, it's war and they're reporting, what they consider propaganda, so they're not going to let them stay in their country, and I totally respect that, or you can take the other side of that and say, okay, that's pretty shady that now they're not letting the news on the other side report because it's going to be counter to what they want as the narrative. So anyway, that's a fair overall take on both sides. All right, real quick, I had a lot of people love the Noam Chomsky clip that I played yesterday, and in particular, I had a few of them really talk about the beginning, maybe 10 seconds. So let me play that for you again, because I do think it was pretty powerful. And like I said, I can't say I agree with everything Noam Chomsky talks about, but this is a pretty solid intellectual take from him. Give a listen.
Part of the tragedy of the Palestinians is that they have essentially no international support for a good reason. They don't have wealth, they don't have power, so they don't have rights. That's the way the world works, Your rights correspond to your power and your wealth. Same inside the United States. Shouldn't be surprised to see it. If you're a poor black kid in Roxbury, you don't have the rights of a rich person living in the suburbs, right? Same in the international arena. So the Palestinians, they may get, statements of support, but and nobody's going to do much for them, especially when the U.S. Threatens anyone who might try to do something.
All right, that is pretty much the main set of things that I received a lot of questions and commentary on. Actually, the main one was the last clip I played yesterday, which was the Mehdi Hassan clip from The Intercept. By the way, I did add a link to that in the show notes for episode 42. So if you want to hear that, you can obviously hopefully listen to episode 42 and catch it at the end. Or if you just want to listen to that part, just go into the description or the show notes, which is below the actual play button in your podcast platform, or on our website if you're listening through the web browser, and then scroll all the way down to the bottom and there'll be a link for that. I'm not going to talk about that more because I am gathering more information on Yasser Arafat, the PLO, and really Benjamin Netanyahu and what he did to support, this is true. He did support Hamas in order to basically make the PLO and Yasser Arafat weaker, which at that time was a much stronger enemy for him. So more to come on that. And then lastly, I'm going to play for you something. So this is a 1-minute clip where, again, this is, I know I've been pretty critical of some of these right-wing media talking head guys, and Clay Travis and Buck Sexton being two of the biggest ones I've been critical of. When, again, I previously had liked a lot of their takes, but I want you to listen to this. This is a take that he had on Megan Rapinoe. Megan Rapinoe, as you know, is the United States, one of the greatest women's soccer players of all time. She's that blonde girl that colors her hair. So give this a listen.
Megan Rapinoe, for those of you who don't know, is the U.S. women's soccer player who refused to stand for the national anthem because she said America is a fundamentally racist place. She is not a good person in terms of the way that she's used her platform, in my opinion, politically. She is married to Sue Bird, Buck, Sue Bird is, I believe, half Jewish and has an Israeli passport. Sue Bird is a very talented women's basketball player. Megan Rapinoe, lesbian, married to Sue Bird. She is raising money on her Instagram account for people in Gaza. She is a lesbian woman living and married under the protections of the United States. She would be murdered, probably stoned to death in Hamas for being a lesbian who's married to an Israeli. I don't think there's any doubt about this.
All right, so the question I asked, and I put it as a poll on Instagram and Facebook in the stories is, is this a fair take from him? Is this a fair description of what Megan Rapinoe did and how it should be interpreted? And I'm going to give you my opinion on this. Honestly, I'm not a Megan Rapinoe fan. I haven't really liked the way she has conducted herself, especially I just don't like people that, if you live in the United States and you have things to critique, that's fine. Seriously, that's totally fine. But I don't know, for some reason I felt like she's just one of those that critiques everything. But I will say, I don't think this is a fair take from Clay Travis. I really don't. I think it's also convoluting things. It's mixing things up. She's married to a Jewish or half-Jewish Sue Bird, the great women's basketball player who has an Israeli passport. I mean, honestly, how on earth can you be married to someone that is, Israeli and Jewish and then support, basically Clay is saying she's supporting Hamas and this fundraiser on her page is going to raise money for Hamas. And that's crazy. I mean, I don't think that's what she's doing. I think she is raising money for innocent civilians that are in Gaza, innocent Palestinians. I don't think, first of all, any relationship could endure that or withstand, doing that. That's crazy. But the bigger point I want to make is these media guys, they really convolute things, like why can't you not like Megan Rapinoe, but then say, hey, you know what? She's doing a fundraiser and, my concern is, will that money get to the civilians in Gaza, the innocent people? As we talked about yesterday, Hamas is so intertwined into that society. And if they really control everything, is this money going to get to the civilians? Now that's a fair take. That is a fair take. But I don't think it's a fair take to basically say, oh, look at what Megan Rapinoe's doing. She is supporting terrorism. And that's basically what he said. And there's several other posts between him and Buck Sexton. And then several other people have chimed in, to take that exact stance. And honestly, I think that's convoluting and mixing things and then telling the story the way you want to tell the story or the way you want the story to be told. All right, I feel like my voice is starting to give out on me. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to call it 33 minutes, 50 seconds, a shorter one compared to what we've been doing normally. But I really do hope that this, bonus episode, so to speak, provided a lot of clarity to episode 42. Again, if you didn't listen to episode 42, I think it would make a lot of sense to go back and listen to 42 and then come listen to 43. And that's it, everybody. Appreciate everything. Please continue to reach out. Send me emails, deepshallowdive@gmail.com. You can also do it on the Contact Us form on the website. Again, we're on all the socials. The Facebook page is starting to get a lot of chatter, actually. So if you're a Facebook person, just search Deep Shallow Dive, and then you can like and follow the page. I'm posting a lot of stuff there, and it's creating some interesting conversations. Same thing on Instagram, obviously at Deep Shallow Dive, at Deep Shallow Dive on TikTok. All right, that's it. I had to kind of plug all those things again because I really am trying to build a community here. Lastly, if you're up for it, 5-star review, that would be amazing. If you're not ready yet, totally cool. That's it. Call a spade a spade. 35 minutes out.
This episode was brought to you by Boost Liquid Vitamins. Wake up, take your Boost, start your day. Drink your vitamins, build your immune system with Boost. Available on Boost.com.